The sky above the human outpost was a war zone. Alien dreadnoughts hovered like dark specters, their cannons lighting the night with deadly precision. Explosions rippled across the ground as energy blasts tore through defenses, reducing towering structures to rubble. Colonel Elena Voss, blood streaking her face, crouched behind the smoldering remains of a transport, her comlink buzzing with frantic voices. "Command, we've lost sectors 3 through 5, a panicked voice shouted. "Their ground forces are advancing." Elena pressed a hand to her ear. "Hold the line," she barked, her voice sharp despite the chaos. "We need more time." The outpost's main shield generator hummed weakly in the distance, its protective dome flickering under the relentless assault. Elena glanced toward the horizon where the wormhole stabilizer loomed, a massive, spiraling construct of metal and energy. It was their last hope. If the stabilizer didn't activate in time, humanity's resistance would end here. A deafening roar overhead drew her gaze skyward. The largest alien warship, its hull glinting like black glass, released a barrage of energy bolts that streaked toward the ground. Elena's breath caught as one blast struck the shield generator. The dome sputtered, then collapsed entirely, leaving the outpost exposed. "Command, this is Voss," she shouted into her comlink, adrenaline surging through her veins. "The shields are down. We're out of time." A crackling response came through. "Colonel, the wormhole isn't stable. If you jump now, we don't have a choice." Elena snapped. She turned to the soldiers huddled nearby, their faces grim but resolute. "Fall back to the wormhole. We'll cover you." As the soldiers began their retreat, Elena unslung her rifle, her eyes narrowing. Alien ground troops emerged from the smoke, their elongated forms glinting in the dim light. They moved with terrifying precision, their weapons cutting down any who stood in their way. Elena opened fire, her shots finding their mark. The aliens faltered but didn't stop. She gritted her teeth, her mind racing. The wormhole was their only chance, but it was a gamble, a leap into the unknown. If the calculations were off by even a fraction, it could scatter them across the galaxy or leave them stranded in the void. "Colonel," a voice called out. Elena turned to see Dr. Arjun Kesh, the lead scientist on the wormhole project, running toward her. His lab coat was singed, and his face was streaked with soot. "The stabilizer needs another 5 minutes." "We don't have 5 minutes," Elena retorted. "The shields are down, and the aliens are closing in." Kesh hesitated, then nodded grimly. "We'll have to bypass the safety protocols. It's risky, but it's our only option." "Do it," Elena said, "and pray that it works." As Kesh ran toward the stabilizer, Elena turned her attention back to the advancing enemy. The alien warship above shifted, its cannons glowing as they prepared for another volley. The ground trembled, and Elena knew they were seconds away from annihilation. She keyed her comlink. "All units, this is Voss. Fall back to the wormhole and prepare for immediate departure. We're making the jump." The outpost shook violently as the alien cannons fired, their blasts obliterating what remained of the defenses. Soldiers poured into the wormhole chamber, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. The stabilizer roared to life, its spiraling rings glowing with energy as the wormhole began to form. Elena was the last to enter. She turned one final time to face the battlefield, her chest tight with the weight of everything they were leaving behind. The alien troops closed in, their weapons raised. "Goodbye, Earth," she murmured. She stepped through the wormhole just as the alien cannons fired again, their blasts engulfing the outpost in a fiery inferno. The last thing Elena saw was the blinding light of the wormhole consuming her, its swirling vortex carrying her into the unknown. Elena's body felt like it was being pulled apart and compressed at the same time. The swirling light of the wormhole engulfed her, its colors shifting between dazzling brilliance and suffocating darkness. She gritted her teeth, fighting the nausea and disorientation that threatened to overwhelm her. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. She stumbled forward, her boots hitting solid ground. The air was cool and thin, a stark contrast to the fiery chaos she had left behind. Around her, the surviving soldiers and scientists emerged from the vortex, their faces pale and drawn. "Is everyone accounted for?" Elena called out, her voice hoarse. Major Alvarez, his helmet cracked and his uniform scorched, approached her. "We're still running head counts," he said. "We lost some during the jump. The stabilizer wasn't stable enough." Elena's stomach tightened, but she pushed the thought aside. There was no time for grief. They had to assess their situation. She turned her gaze to their surroundings. The landscape was alien and unearthly. Towering crystalline structures jutted from the ground, their surfaces shimmering with an iridescent glow. Strange plants with bioluminescent tendrils swayed in an unseen breeze, and the sky was a swirling expanse of deep purple, punctuated by two suns. It was beautiful and utterly foreign. Dr. Kesh stumbled toward her, clutching a datapad. "We made it," he said, his voice filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. "But the coordinates were imprecise. This isn't the intended destination." "Where are we?" Elena asked. Kesh shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted. "The wormhole destabilized during the jump. We could be anywhere in the galaxy or beyond it." Elena suppressed a surge of frustration. They had escaped the alien fleet, but they were far from safe. "Start gathering data," she ordered. "We need to figure out where we are and if this place is habitable." As the survivors began setting up temporary shelters and scanning the area, Elena's comlink crackled to life. "Colonel, you need to see this," came Alvarez's voice, tense with urgency. Elena followed the signal to a nearby ridge, where Alvarez and a group of soldiers stood, their weapons raised. Beyond them, a massive structure loomed, a monolithic tower that pulsed with a faint blue light. Its architecture was unlike anything Elena had ever seen, a blend of organic curves and mechanical precision. "Is that?" Elena began, her voice trailing off. "Alien," Alvarez confirmed. "But it's not theirs," he added, referring to the invaders they had fled. "It's different." Elena's mind raced. The structure could hold the answers they needed, or it could be a trap. Either way, they couldn't ignore it. "Assemble a team," she said. "We're going in." The interior of the tower was just as strange as its exterior. The walls seemed to ripple with energy, and the air was thick with an otherworldly hum. Strange symbols glowed faintly, their patterns shifting as the team moved deeper inside. Kesh examined the symbols, his face alight with curiosity. "This isn't just a structure," he said. "It's a machine, or part of one. Can it help us get home?" Elena asked. Kesh hesitated. "If we can figure out how to interface with it, maybe. But it's incredibly advanced. This technology is centuries, maybe millennia, beyond anything we've seen." Before Elena could respond, the hum grew louder. The symbols on the walls pulsed with light, and the floor beneath them shuddered. Alvarez raised his weapon, his eyes scanning the shadows. "What's happening?" Elena demanded. Kesh's eyes widened. "I think we activated something." The team braced as a holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the room. It was a map, a vast, intricate web of stars and pathways, with one point highlighted in a vivid green glow. Kesh studied it, his expression a mix of awe and determination. "That's another wormhole," he said. "A stable one. If we can reach it, it might take us home." Elena nodded, her mind already formulating a plan. "Then we move," she said. "Pack up the camp. We're heading for the wormhole." But as the team turned to leave, the tower shuddered again. The light from the map intensified, and a deep, resonant sound echoed through the structure. It was a warning, and it didn't come alone. From the shadows emerged a new threat. Tall, sinewy figures with glowing eyes and crystalline armor stepped forward, their movements fluid and predatory. They weren't the aliens they had fled from, but something else entirely, something that had been waiting. "Contact!" Alvarez shouted, raising his weapon. Elena drew her rifle, her heart pounding. They had escaped one enemy, only to find another. The battle for survival was far from over. The air inside the alien tower grew heavy with tension as the crystalline figures advanced, their glowing eyes locked on the intruders. Elena tightened her grip on her rifle, her mind racing. They didn't know what these creatures were or what they wanted, but their intentions were clear enough. "Alvarez, hold the line," Elena barked. "Kesh, get that map data downloaded. We need to move." The first shot rang out, a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. Alvarez's team opened fire, their bullets shattering against the crystalline armor of the figures. The creatures responded in kind, emitting beams of searing light that cut through the air with deadly precision. "They're not going down," a soldier shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Elena cursed under her breath. The crystalline armor was almost impervious, reflecting and absorbing the energy of their weapons. "Aim for the gaps," she ordered. "Find a weakness." The battle was chaotic, the chamber filled with flashes of light and the deafening roar of gunfire. Elena moved with purpose, her instincts honed by years of combat. She fired at one of the creatures, her shots finding the exposed joints between its armor. The creature staggered, a high-pitched sound emanating from its core before it collapsed in a heap of shards. "They're vulnerable at the joints," she called out. "Focus your fire." As the soldiers adjusted their tactics, Kesh worked frantically at the console. His fingers danced over the alien interface, the symbols shifting and rearranging under his touch. "I've almost got it," he shouted. "Just a little more time." Elena didn't respond. She was too focused on keeping the creatures at bay. Her heart pounded as she dodged a beam of light, the heat singeing her hair. Another creature lunged at her, its crystalline claws glinting menacingly. She rolled out of the way and fired, her shots hitting the joints of its legs. The creature crumpled, its armor shattering like glass. "Colonel, we're getting overwhelmed," Alvarez shouted. "We need to fall back." Before Elena could respond, Kesh's voice rang out. "I've got it. The map data is downloaded." Elena turned to him, her expression fierce. "Then let's move. Fall back to the exit." The team retreated in a coordinated maneuver, their weapons firing in controlled bursts to cover their escape. The creatures pursued them relentlessly, their glowing eyes cutting through the dim light. As the last soldier exited the tower, Kesh hit a button on his datapad, triggering a burst of energy from the console. The entrance to the tower sealed shut, trapping the creatures inside. The survivors collapsed outside, their breaths ragged. The alien landscape seemed almost peaceful compared to the chaos they had just escaped. Elena looked around, taking stock of her team. They had taken casualties, but they were still standing for now. "Kesh, what did you find?" she asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Kesh held up his datapad, the holographic map glowing faintly. "The wormhole is about 50 kilometers from here," he said. "It's stable, but we'll need to move fast. The longer we stay here, the more vulnerable we are." Elena nodded. "Then we move out at first light," she said. "Get some rest, but stay alert. We don't know what else is out there." The journey to the wormhole was fraught with challenges. The alien terrain was treacherous, with jagged cliffs and unpredictable weather patterns. Strange creatures watched them from the shadows, their glowing eyes a reminder that this world was far from safe. Supplies ran low, and the weight of their losses pressed heavily on the survivors. But despite the hardships, they pressed on. Elena led the way, her resolve unwavering. She knew that the wormhole was their only chance of returning to humanity, and their only hope of warning Earth about the threats that lay beyond. When they finally reached the wormhole, it was both a relief and a new source of tension. The swirling vortex pulsed with energy, its edges crackling like a living entity. Kesh began setting up the equipment to stabilize the entry point, his hands moving with practiced precision. "This will take a few hours," he said. "We need to hold this position until it's ready." Elena turned to her team. "Fortify the area," she ordered. "Set up perimeter defenses. We're not leaving anything to chance." As the team worked, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She scanned the horizon, her hand hovering over her weapon. The alien tower was no longer visible, but she knew the crystalline creatures wouldn't stop pursuing them. They had activated something inside that structure, something that wouldn't rest until it was neutralized. The first attack came at sunset. The creatures emerged from the shadows, their forms shimmering in the fading light. The survivors fought with everything they had, their weapons aimed with precision at the creatures' joints. But the numbers were overwhelming, and the defenses began to falter. "Kesh, how much longer?" Elena shouted over the chaos. "Almost there," he replied, his voice strained. "Just keep them off me." Elena gritted her teeth, her rifle kicking against her shoulder as she fired. The battle was a desperate struggle, each moment stretching into eternity. She knew that if they failed now, there would be no second chances. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, the wormhole stabilized. Its light intensified, casting an otherworldly glow over the battlefield. Kesh shouted, "It's ready. We can go through." Elena didn't hesitate. "Fall back to the wormhole," she ordered. "Go, go." The survivors retreated, their movements quick and coordinated despite the chaos. One by one, they plunged into the vortex, the swirling light consuming them. Elena was the last to enter, her gaze lingering on the battlefield. "We'll find a way back," she whispered. With that, she stepped through the wormhole, leaving the alien world behind. The transition through the wormhole was smoother this time, but no less disorienting. Elena stumbled as she emerged, the blinding light fading into a stark, unfamiliar landscape. Around her, the survivors collapsed to the ground, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief. The new world was vastly different from the last. The air was crisp and cold, and the sky was a vivid shade of orange, dotted with unfamiliar constellations. Towering mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks capped with snow. A sprawling forest of silverleaf trees stretched out before them, their branches swaying gently despite the lack of wind. "Where are we now?" Alvarez asked, his voice hoarse. Kesh consulted his datapad, his fingers trembling. "The coordinates suggest we've traveled farther than we intended," he said. "This system doesn't match any known star charts. We're off the map." Elena's stomach tightened. They had escaped one danger only to land in another unknown. "What's our status?" she asked, turning to Alvarez. He shook his head. "We're running low on supplies, and the team is at their limit," he said. "We can't keep hopping from one wormhole to another without a plan." Kesh interjected, his expression grave. "There's something else," he said. "The wormhole generator took significant damage during the last jump. It's functional, but barely. If we use it again without repairs, there's no guarantee we'll survive survive the trip. Elena closed her eyes, her mind racing. They were stranded in an uncharted system with limited resources and no clear path home. The odds were grim, but giving up wasn't an option. "We'll make it work," she said. "We always do." As the survivors set up a temporary camp, Elena and Kesh examined the wormhole generator. The device was battered, its metal casing scorched and cracked. Wires dangled from its interior, sparking intermittently. Kesh worked tirelessly to stabilize it, his hands deft despite his exhaustion. "This tech was never meant to handle this kind of strain," he muttered. "We're pushing it beyond its limits." Elena crouched beside him, her gaze steady. "What do we need to fix it?" Kesh glanced at her, hesitation in his eyes. "Parts we don't have," he admitted, "but there might be a solution. If this planet has advanced technology, anything close to what we found in the tower, we could use it to repair the generator." Elena nodded. "Then we start searching," she said, "but we do it carefully. I don't want a repeat of what happened back there." The days that followed were a test of endurance. The survivors explored the alien forest, mapping the terrain and scavenging for resources. The silverleaf trees yielded strange, edible fruits, and a nearby river provided fresh water. Despite the challenges, there was a sense of resilience among the group, a determination to survive no matter the odds. Their first discovery came unexpectedly. Alvarez and his team stumbled upon a series of ruins deep within the forest, hidden beneath layers of moss and vines. The structures were ancient, their surfaces etched with intricate symbols that glowed faintly in the twilight. At the center of the ruins was a massive obelisk, its surface smooth and unbroken. "What do you make of it?" Elena asked, her voice low. Kesh studied the obelisk, his fingers tracing the glowing symbols. "It's a power source," he said, "but it's dormant. If we can reactivate it, we might be able to use it to repair the generator." "What's the catch?" Elena asked, her instincts on high alert. Kesh hesitated. "The symbols suggest it's part of a network," he said. "Activating it could trigger a response. One we're not prepared for." Elena's jaw tightened. Every step forward seemed to bring new risks, but they had no choice. "Do it," she said, "but be ready for anything." The activation process was slow and painstaking. Kesh worked methodically, his every movement calculated. As he adjusted the obelisk's interface, the symbols began to glow brighter, their light pulsing in rhythmic patterns. The ground beneath them trembled, and a low hum filled the air. And then, without warning, the obelisk emitted a burst of energy. The survivors shielded their eyes as the light engulfed the ruins, its intensity blinding. When it subsided, the obelisk was fully active, its surface shimmering with power. But the activation had not gone unnoticed. From the depths of the forest came a series of guttural roars, the sound growing louder with each passing moment. Elena raised her weapon, her heart pounding. "We've got company," she shouted. The creatures that emerged were unlike anything they had faced before. Massive and predatory, they moved with terrifying speed, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shimmered in the light of the obelisk. Their eyes glowed with a feral intelligence, and their roars shook the ground. "Hold the line," Elena ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. The battle was fierce, the survivors fighting with everything they had. The creatures were relentless, their strength and agility unmatched. For every one they brought down, two more seemed to take its place. But amidst the chaos, the obelisk began to hum with increasing intensity. Kesh shouted over the noise, his voice urgent. "It's generating a signal. It's linked to something big." Elena fired at a charging creature, her mind racing. The obelisk was their key to survival, but it was also a beacon, drawing threats to their location. They were running out of time. "Kesh, can we use the power now?" she shouted. "Almost," he replied. "Just hold them off a little longer." The survivors formed a defensive perimeter around the obelisk, their weapons firing in coordinated bursts. The ground was littered with the bodies of the creatures, but their numbers showed no signs of dwindling. Elena's arms ached, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but she refused to give in. And then, with a final surge of light, the obelisk's energy output stabilized. Kesh let out a triumphant shout. "It's ready. We can repair the generator." Elena didn't hesitate. "Fall back to the camp," she ordered. "We're done here." The survivors retreated, their movements swift and disciplined. The creatures pursued them, but the light of the obelisk seemed to deter them, forcing them to stay back. It was a small victory, but it was enough. When they returned to the camp, Kesh immediately set to work on the generator. The survivors stood watch, their eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. The tension was palpable, every moment stretching into eternity. Finally, Kesh stepped back from the generator, his face pale but determined. "It's done," he said. "We're ready to make the jump." Elena nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of their journey. "Let's get off this rock," she said. The survivors gathered around the wormhole generator as Kesh powered it up. The device emitted a low hum, its damaged components now reinforced with the energy harnessed from the obelisk. The swirling vortex began to form, its edges glowing with an unearthly light. Elena's gaze lingered on the shimmering portal. This was their chance to escape, to find their way back to humanity. But the cost of their journey weighed heavily on her. They had lost so much: friends, resources, and a piece of themselves. Her fingers brushed the dog tags around her neck, a silent tribute to those who hadn't made it this far. Alvarez, she said, her voice steady. What's the status of the perimeter? Clear for now, Alvarez replied. But we won't stay that way for long. Whatever we stirred up back there is still coming. Elena nodded. Then we don't wait. Kesh, is the generator stable? Kesh hesitated, his hands hovering over the controls. As stable as it's going to get, he said. The coordinates are set, but there's a margin of error. It's not perfect. It never is, Elena said. She turned to the group, her voice carrying over the hum of the generator. This is it. We're going through. Stay close, watch each other's backs, and keep moving. We've made it this far. We're not stopping now. The survivors lined up, their expressions a mix of determination and apprehension. The first group stepped into the wormhole, disappearing into the vortex with a flash of light. One by one, the others followed, their figures swallowed by the swirling energy. Elena was the last to approach the portal. She glanced at Kesh, who gave her a weary nod. See you on the other side, he said. She stepped into the wormhole, her body enveloped by its disorienting light. The sensation was familiar yet no less unsettling, like being stretched and compressed simultaneously. And then, with a jolt, she emerged on the other side. The sight that greeted her stole her breath. The survivors had arrived in a vast, domed structure that shimmered with translucent walls. Beyond the dome, a starfield stretched endlessly, the view unlike anything they had seen before. Suspended in the center of the structure was a massive orb of light, its surface rippling like liquid fire. Where are we? Alvarez asked, his voice filled with awe. Kesh examined his datapad, his eyes wide. This isn't Earth, he said. It's a transit hub, a nexus point for wormholes. I didn't think it was real. Elena's mind raced. The nexus was a legend among scientists, a theoretical construct where wormholes converged. If it was real, it could be their ticket home. But it also meant they weren't alone. Spread out, she ordered. Search for anything that can tell us where the Earth wormhole is located. As the survivors explored the nexus, the tension in the air grew. The orb of light pulsed rhythmically, casting long shadows across the floor. Strange, faint whispers echoed through the structure, as if the nexus itself was alive. Kesh approached a console embedded in the floor, its surface glowing faintly. He studied the symbols, his fingers brushing over the interface. This is incredible, he murmured. The technology here, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. Can you find Earth's coordinates? Elena asked. Kesh nodded slowly. I think so, he said, but it's going to take time. There's a security protocol, layers of encryption. Whoever built this didn't want just anyone using it. Before Elena could respond, a distant sound caught her attention. It was faint at first, a low hum that grew steadily louder. The survivors froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the noise. From the far end of the nexus, a shadow began to move. It was massive, its form shifting and fluid. As it drew closer, its details became clearer. A towering figure of pure energy, its body crackling with light. It moved with purpose, its presence commanding and undeniable. What the hell is that? Alvarez whispered, his grip tightening on his weapon. Guardian, Kesh said, his voice trembling. It's a guardian of the nexus. We must have triggered it. The guardian halted, its glowing eyes scanning the group. When it spoke, its voice resonated in their minds, a deep, otherworldly tone that sent shivers down their spines. You are unworthy, it said. The nexus is not for you. Elena stepped forward, her stance defiant. We're not here to take the nexus, she said. We're just trying to get home. The guardian tilted its head, its gaze piercing. Home, it repeated. You seek to return to your origin, yet you bring chaos. Prove your worth or be erased. The ground beneath them trembled, and the guardian raised its arms. Beams of light shot from its hands, striking the floor and creating barriers that separated the group. Elena found herself alone, facing the towering figure. Her heart pounded, but she refused to back down. You want proof, she said. We've survived everything the universe has thrown at us. We're still standing. If that's not enough, then you'll have to kill me. The guardian paused, its light dimming slightly. Your defiance is noted, it said, but actions speak louder than words. Prove your unity. Prove your purpose. The barriers around the survivors began to shift, forming a maze of light and shadow. The guardian's voice echoed through the nexus. Find the path. Restore balance. Only then will you earn passage. Elena clenched her fists, determination flaring hammering in her chest. "We'll find the path," she said, "and we'll show you what humanity is capable of." With that, she stepped into the maze, her team following close behind. The journey through the Nexus had only just begun. The maze was a living enigma, its walls shifting and shimmering with an ever-changing pattern of light. Each turn seemed to lead to new challenges, forcing the survivors to work together in ways they hadn't anticipated. It was as if the Nexus itself was testing not just their physical endurance, but their ability to trust one another. Elena led the way, her rifle slung over her shoulder as she studied the maze's intricate pathways. Symbols on the walls pulsed faintly, their patterns seeming to hint at a hidden logic. She glanced back at Kesh, who was studying his datapad. "Can you make sense of this?" she asked. Kesh nodded slowly, his brow furrowed. "The patterns are a language," he said. "It's a puzzle. If we can decode it, we can find the right path." "Alvarez, take point with me," Elena ordered. "The rest of you stay close. No one wanders off." As they moved deeper into the maze, the challenges grew more complex. At one point, the group found themselves trapped in a chamber where the floor shifted with every step, creating a perilous game of balance. At another, they encountered a series of glowing orbs that emitted pulses of energy, forcing them to time their movements carefully. Through it all, Elena kept the team focused, her leadership unwavering. When morale faltered, she reminded them of what they were fighting for. When tempers flared, she diffused the tension with calm authority. Her resolve became a beacon, guiding them through the maze's trials. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the maze's center. The chamber was vast and circular, its walls lined with towering columns of light. In the center stood the Nexus Guardian, its form crackling with energy. It regarded them silently as they approached. "You have reached the heart of the maze," the Guardian said, its voice resonating in their minds. "But your journey is not yet complete. One final test remains." The Guardian raised its hand, and a projection appeared in the air. It was a vision of Earth, its surface scarred and burning. The sight sent a chill through the group. "Your world is on the brink," the Guardian said. "The choices you make here will determine its fate. Are you prepared to sacrifice for your people, to ensure their survival even at great personal cost?" Elena stepped forward, her jaw set. "We are," she said firmly. "We've already sacrificed more than you can imagine, but we're still standing. We'll do whatever it takes." The Guardian studied her for a long moment. "Your words carry weight," it said, "but words alone are not enough." The projection shifted, revealing a complex series of symbols and pathways. "This is the final puzzle," the Guardian explained. "Solve it, and you will earn passage to your world. Fail, and the Nexus will remain closed." Kesh stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly. "I can do this," he said, "but I'll need time." Elena placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've got this," she said. "We'll cover you." As Kesh worked on the puzzle, the chamber began to tremble. The Guardian's presence grew more intense, its energy filling the air with a palpable charge. From the edges of the chamber, new threats emerged, constructs of light and shadow that moved with deadly precision. "Alvarez, hold them off," Elena shouted, raising her rifle. The team formed a defensive line around Kesh, their weapons blazing as the constructs advanced. The battle was chaotic, the constructs seemingly endless. Elena fought with everything she had, her movements precise and calculated. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she refused to falter. "Almost there," Kesh shouted, his voice strained. "Just a little more." The Guardian watched silently, its gaze unyielding. Elena wondered if it was truly impartial or if it was rooting for their success. The thought was fleeting, driven out by the need to focus on the fight. Finally, with a triumphant cry, Kesh completed the puzzle. The projection dissolved, and the Guardian stepped forward. "You have proven your unity and resolve," it said. "The Nexus is yours to command." The chamber filled with light as the Nexus activated. A swirling vortex appeared in the center, its energy pulsing with stability. The sight filled Elena with relief and a renewed sense of purpose. "Let's go home," she said. One by one, the survivors stepped into the vortex, their figures vanishing into the light. Elena was the last to leave. She turned to the Guardian, her expression solemn. "Thank you," she said. The Guardian inclined its head. "May your actions honor your resolve," it said. With that, Elena stepped into the vortex, the light consuming her. When she emerged, the sight of Earth filled her vision. The blue-green planet hung in space, battered but still standing. Tears pricked her eyes as she realized they had made it. "We're home," she whispered. The survivors cheered, their voices filled with relief and joy. They had faced the impossible and prevailed. But as Elena looked at the scars on Earth's surface, surface, she knew their journey was far from over. The fight to rebuild, to protect their world from future threats, was only just beginning. As the ship's systems came to life, Elena stood at the helm, her gaze steady. "This is Colonel Elena Voss," she said into the comms. "We're back, and we're ready for whatever comes next." Earth's surface was a tapestry of scars and survival. The alien invasion had left cities in ruins, landscapes scorched, and the atmosphere heavy with the remnants of battle. As Elena and her team stepped onto the battered planet, the gravity of their journey weighed on them. The survivors were greeted by a mix of relief and apprehension. The remaining human forces had fought valiantly to hold the line, but their resources were dwindling and morale was frayed. Elena immediately took charge, rallying the troops and sharing the knowledge they had gained during their harrowing journey. "We've seen what's out there," she said during a global broadcast. Her voice carried the weight of experience, her words deliberate and resolute. "The universe is vast and dangerous, but it's also filled with possibilities. We survived because we worked together, because we refused to give up. That's how we'll rebuild. Together." Her words ignited a spark of hope across the fractured planet. Teams of engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to reverse engineer the technology they had brought back from the Nexus. The wormhole generator, now repaired and improved, became a symbol of humanity's resilience, a gateway not just for escape, but for exploration and understanding. As Earth began to heal, Elena found herself grappling with the weight of leadership. The scars of the journey ran deep, and the losses they had endured were a constant reminder of the cost of survival. She spent her nights poring over strategic plans, her mind racing with ways to prepare for the threats she knew would come. One evening, as she stood on a hill overlooking the rebuilt capital, Kesh approached her. He looked older, the lines on his face etched by the trials they had endured. "You should rest," he said gently. Elena shook her head, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "There's too much to do," she replied. "We've bought ourselves time, but we're not safe." "Not yet." Kesh placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than anyone could have asked," he said. "But we can't rebuild this world alone. You've inspired people, Elena. Let them take up the mantle. Trust them." Elena turned to him, her expression softening. "I trust them," she said, "but I can't stop thinking about what's out there. The Nexus wasn't just a tool, it was a warning. There's so much we don't understand." Kesh nodded. "And we'll face it just like we always have," he said. Together, the following weeks were a blur of activity. The survivors worked alongside Earth's remaining population to rebuild infrastructure, establish new alliances, and fortify defenses. The scars of the invasion became reminders of their resilience, and the technology they had brought back became the foundation of a new era. But amidst the progress, there were whispers of unease. Strange energy signatures were detected near the moon, and unusual signals echoed through space. Elena knew the threats they had faced were only the beginning. The universe was vast, and humanity's place in it was far from secure. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, Elena stood on the observation deck of Earth's newly rebuilt orbital station. The station, constructed with alien-inspired technology, was a testament to humanity's ingenuity. It also served as a watchtower, scanning the cosmos for signs of danger. Alvarez joined her, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "You think they'll come back?" he asked. Elena didn't hesitate. "They always do," she said. "But this time, we'll be ready." As the station's sensors hummed softly, detecting the faint whispers of the universe, Elena allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had faced the brink of extinction and emerged stronger. They had seen the vastness of space, the dangers it held, and the potential it offered. And as the stars glimmered above, she knew one thing for certain: their journey was far from over. The universe was calling, and humanity was ready to answer. In the months following their return, humanity began to redefine itself. The lessons of survival extended beyond the battlefield, shaping a new global culture centered on unity, adaptability, and exploration. The scars of the invasion, once painful reminders of loss, became symbols of endurance. Elena took a moment to reflect on the changes as she walked through the newly rebuilt streets of New Beacon. Children played amidst holographic fountains, their laughter echoing against the sleek, alien-inspired architecture. Markets bustled with activity, their stalls offering goods sourced from the surviving ecosystems and experimental off-world farms. A group of students approached her, their faces lit with curiosity. "Colonel Voss," one of them said, clutching a notebook, "can you tell us about the Nexus? What was it like?" Elena smiled, kneeling to meet their eager eyes. The Nexus was overwhelming, she said. It was like standing at the crossroads of the universe. Every star, every possibility felt just within reach. But it was also a reminder of how small we are and how much we have yet to learn. The students nodded solemnly, their awe evident. Elena rose, watching as they ran off to join their friends. They were the future, the generation that would carry humanity forward. And she was determined to give them a world worth inheriting. Back at the orbital station, preparations for humanity's next steps were underway. Engineers worked tirelessly to develop ships capable of traversing wormholes, their designs blending human ingenuity with alien technology. The goal was not just defense, but exploration, to seek out allies, resources, and knowledge that could secure humanity's place in the cosmos. Kesh spearheaded the research team, his passion for discovery undiminished. One evening, Elena joined him in the lab, where holographic schematics filled the air. "How's it coming along?" she asked. Kesh grinned, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Better than I expected," he said. "We've made significant progress on stabilizing wormhole travel. The first prototype ship should be ready for testing within weeks." Elena raised an eyebrow. "And the risks?" Kesh's expression sobered. "They're still there," he admitted. "But every leap forward comes with uncertainty. If we don't try, we'll never know what we're capable of." Elena nodded, her respect for him deepening. "You've done incredible work," she said. "And you're right, we can't let fear hold us back." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's sensors. Alvarez's voice crackled over the comms. "Colonel, we're picking up an unidentified signal. It's faint, but it's repeating." Elena and Kesh exchanged a glance before hurrying to the command center. The signal was displayed on the main monitor, a series of patterns that pulsed with rhythmic precision. Kesh analyzed it, his fingers flying over the console. "It's not random," he said. "This is a message." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the monitor. "Can you decode it?" Kesh nodded. "I'll need time, but yes." Elena straightened, her mind racing. The signal could be a warning, a distress call, or something entirely unexpected. Whatever it was, it had found them, and it couldn't be ignored. "Alvarez," she said, her voice steady, "prepare the fleet. If this is a call, we're answering it." As the room erupted into action, Elena felt a familiar surge of determination. They had come so far, faced so much, and yet the journey was only beginning. The universe was vast and filled with uncertainty, but it was also a canvas of possibility. And as the station's lights dimmed to reveal the stars beyond, Elena knew one thing for certain. Humanity was ready to step into the unknown, not as victims of circumstance, but as pioneers of their destiny.